Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, civil society organizations call for the scrapping of a planned legislation to regulate their activities, insist bill is repressive. Gunmen attack farmhouse of acting chairman of the EFCC, Ibrahim Magu, in the Karshi area of the Federal Capital Territory, killed one policeman. Channels Television wins Television Station of the Year for a record 12th time. And 57 Muslim nations seek recognition of the state of Palestine and East Jerusalem as its occupied capital. On Business News tonight, Moody's assigns GB1 excellent rating to Nigeria's first green bond offer, set to launch on December the 18th.
On sports news, the World Basketball Governing Body, FIFA, hands the Nigerian Basketball Federation a second chance to resolve its leadership impasse before February next year.
And from Abuja, federal government resolves to revive 3 of Nigeria's refineries for optimum performance by 2019.
We begin from the nation's capital, Abuja, where representatives of several civil society organizations in the country gathered to condemn a proposed legislation known as the NGO bill. Now, that bill seeks to establish a commission that will supervise and coordinate all the activities of non-governmental organizations in the country. At a public hearing organized by the House of Representatives, some of the groups described the bill as repressive, a gag on free speech and freedom of expression. They're unanimous in calling for the scrapping of the proposed bill, saying if passed, the bill will also duplicate existing laws. Our correspondent Larry Lassisi reports.
It's a bill that has raised a lot of concern among civil society organizations. It seeks to establish a commission that will register, supervise and monitor the activities of non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations in the country. As the House of Representatives prepares to hold a public hearing on the bill at the National Assembly, activists gather outside to voice their opposition to the bill. Meanwhile, inside the complex, the hearing commences with the views of those gathered coming straight and direct.
I stand with civil society very firmly, and I believe that we have enough laws in this country. We're really not in short of laws, covering almost every dimension of our national life.
We had an outbreak of meningitis in Kano, and the government was not able to come up with the vaccines. My NGO flew in vaccines into this country within 24 hours. If this commission is established, we would have had to go through them. You probably would have met somebody who is not on seat to approve us to make that order, which means for 3 days, yes, because we could have been there for like 3 days waiting, and within that period, a number of children would die, yes. A number of women would die, yes. A number of Nigerians would die.
If you go to subsection 11, sir, it subjects churches to double registration. Having been registered by CAC, churches have to now re-register again and have to give a proposed annual budget. Section 13 then talks about issuing churches, mosques, faith-based organizations with certificates of registration.
One after the other, they say no to the bill. The lawmakers are forced to make this appeal.
We need your ideas. We can take out what you don't want that is favorable, that will make the bill to stand. If the bill cannot stand at all, there is nothing for you people to be aggressive. I have read your mind, your faces here. You are too aggressive, please. Don't be aggressive.
But it appears the position is unanimous.
But are there people who want to speak for the bill so that we don't take too much of your time?
The possible outcomes for the bill going forward is that an amended version of the bill scales through, or the bill is thrown out. Everyone will have to wait to find out the position of the committee when its report is submitted to the House of Representatives. Lanre Lasisi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, human rights lawyer Femi Falana wants the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, to immediately stop the draft bill aiming to regulate and monitor the activities of all civil society organizations and labor unions in the country. Mr. Falana says the bill threatens the very existence of a free and independent civil society in Nigeria. He says, quote, "This is perhaps the worst piece of legislation in Nigeria's history. Under the bill, any civil society group advocating for human rights, basic freedoms and good governance can be shut down and criminalized. The bill, if passed, will ultimately have a disastrous impact on Nigerian citizens' democratic participation in furthering the development of their own country." End of quote. Mr. Falana maintains that should the bill be passed into law, he'll challenge it in court on the grounds of its unconstitutionality and incompatibility with Nigeria's international and regional human rights obligations and commitments. Meanwhile, human rights organization Amnesty International is asking Nigerians to oppose the passage of the non-governmental organization's bill. The rights group said the award threatens the freedom of the people, claiming it would have disastrous effects on Nigerians. Amnesty International is also claiming that the government was trying to pass it quickly as possible before any action was taken to stop it. Now let's attempt a review of what the proposed NGO regulatory bill is. The bill requires the establishment of a commission with powers to register, deregister and license non-governmental organizations known as the Non-Governmental Organizations Regulatory Commission of Nigeria. The bill provides that every NGO shall be registered with the Commission and that this registration shall be renewable every 24 months. The bill provides under Clause 18 that the board can automatically terminate or suspend the certificate of registration of an NGO where renewal is not granted. Projects and activities of NGOs are subject to the approval of the relevant ministry and registered with the Commission. Clauses 25C and 29(1) require that funds pledged by donors must be disclosed before the commencement of the project implementation, along with the mode of disbursement, and transfers from overseas donors must be channeled through the normal banking system. The Commission is also empowered under the bill to pay unscheduled visits to the NGOs and witness randomly selected activities and operations without notice to the organization. Right, let's put all this into perspective now, and joining me is the Executive Director of the African Center for Leadership Strategy and Development, Mr. Otivie Ibuzo. Thanks so much for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Well, the major challenge from the perspective of civil society is that the bill is repressive and it could be open to abuse as well. Is that your impression as well?
Absolutely. There are many reasons why the bill should not go further. It is repressive, it is unconstitutional, it will stifle the voice of civil society, it is against the principles of the open government partnership that Nigeria has signed to. It's a duplication because all the sections of the bill have been covered by other laws, and it will increase the cost of governance unnecessarily.
Well, looking at the bill in a bit more detail, there are a number of clauses that civil society is unhappy with. Let me draw your attention to the one that requires funds. I think funds to be pledged by the donors to be disclosed, and then transfers for overseas donors as well should be channeled through the normal banking system. How do you think that's going to work, and how do you respond to that sort of clause?
That's the point I'm making. Every section of this bill is already covered under the law. Already, if you are getting a foreign donor money in Nigeria, you register with EFCC through SCUMO, and it's already been tracked. So the bill is actually an unnecessary diversion and a waste of time for both legislators and even those of us that are agitating against the bill.
Well, you're
Civil society organizations, NGOs, are already over-regulated in Nigeria.
I was just trying to say there that you're calling it a waste of time, but some are arguing that with all we've seen in terms of security efforts the government is trying to make now to trace perhaps a source of funding, source of financing for terrorist groups, that's an argument they make, that some of those groups hide under the umbrella of non-profit organizations to move money internationally. Is that a legitimate concern for you at all at this point?
That is not any legitimate concern. It is very clear. If any organization is hiding under the platform of NGO and engage in any illegal activities, the law should take its course. It is not because of that that you will now stifle all the NGOs that are doing great work as reflected in the report that has just been given. It is not correct that NGOs are hiding under any terrorist organization. But if the government, through its security and intelligence, discovers any person or organization posing as NGO but involved in terrorist organization, you don't need an NGO regulatory bill to deal with that organization.
Do you find anything wrong, or what do you think of the timing of the bill that it's coming at this time? And seeing as Amnesty International is also alleging that it seems to be they seem to want to pass it really quickly. Do you think there's anything wrong with that as well?
No, actually what is happening is a trend. On 26 November 2015, Nigeria, North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China voted against a UN resolution calling for the protection of human rights defenders. On 1st July 2016, Nigerian government voted against another UN resolution calling for providing an enabling environment for NGOs to operate globally. And if you look at the global system and the knowledge we are getting every day, it is clear that any country that wants to develop must depend on the tri-sector: government, private sector, and civil society. If you look at even the attempt to eradicate poverty across the world, from the MDGs to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, you see that there is increasing attention to the role of civil society across the world. And if you see countries that are developing, this is the trend you see. So, this even bill is not just now. In 2014, a similar bill was introduced, which was through mobilization by civil society. Yeah. It was killed on arrival. And now they are bringing this bill again. Meanwhile, all of this is against the principles of the Buhari administration as epitomized by its signing the Open Government Partnership. All right. The Open Government Partnership actually requires partnership with civil society, co-creation, and equal partnership. So all of this bill is an unnecessary diversion, and I think this should be the last time that this kind of unnecessary diversion should be, the Nigerian people should be subjected to.
At that point, we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much, Mr. Otivie Ibuzo, for sharing your thoughts on the news at 10 tonight.
It's my pleasure.
The President is appealing to the international community to support Nigeria's commitment to reducing the negative effects of climate change. President Muhammadu Buhari was speaking to world leaders attending the One Planet Summit in France, where he noted that Nigeria cannot implement its nationally determined contribution without adequate financial, technical and capacity-building support from the developed countries. He says, quote, Nigeria has embraced the issuance of the Green Bond as an innovative and alternative source of projects funding that will help reduce emissions and provide robust climate infrastructure such as renewable energy, low-carbon transport, water infrastructure and sustainable agriculture in line with the Paris Agreement. The President also told the gathering that the government is actively promoting technologies and practices such as sustainable land management, climate-resilient agriculture, water efficiency, clean energy and skills for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, among others. In part two, after the break, judge recuses herself from hearing Justice Muhammad Yunusa's corruption case, gives no reason for her decision. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.